Okay, wanted to do another installment in my talking about amps. Today I want to talk about the Orion amplifiers. Um, this one I'm going to incorporate a few different series into one because I don't have a whole bunch of Orion. But in two they're pretty similar except for some GX series, which I'll get into that. But all these amplifiers. The large one up there, that is a 425, basically two of the 225s in one chassis. I have a Orion 250 HCCA and then an Orion 225 HCCA. The amp link, which those are pretty hard to find. I did see one for the SX series just sold. But so they're out there, but you don't see them too often. And then these are the SX. The XS or the SX 2150 is the same board as the 250 HCCA, but that's designed for high current and that's a high power model. Here I have a 222 SX, a little peanut amp. It's 44 watts RMS, but it also you'll see probably around 100 watts total when it's bridged at 4 ohm. And then here we have the 280GX. This is the previous series to the SX. And one of the things that they changed, there was one in between. They actually existed at the same time, the GX and the SX. The first SXs had the moon and stars still, but they were milled into the extruded aluminum heatsink, and those were pretty sharp amps. The GX, that's like a vinyl sticker printed and just stuck on in between the kind of Orion's design cue of the two bars going down, milled after paint or anodized process. I don't have, I'd like to have, but they don't come up very often and they go for pretty big money, is the NTs. And they had a marble anodized heatsink, the same as these, but it was just, they were just gorgeous. Probably the most beautiful heatsink you'll ever see, in my opinion. They're just gorgeous amps, and those are more for sound quality, not real high power. I mean, some of them were pretty large, but they were more designed for sound quality versus putting out power. These This is the second generation, the digital reference. So the original HCCAs were more like this. Unfortunately, this one's in a little bit of rough shape. It's kind of hard to see, but the moon and stars logo, if I can get it, looks like that. And then there's a 425 HCCA. That's a fairly rare amp. I haven't really seen these up. I saw this one on eBay, and I mean I got it for a steal. I think I paid a little over $100 for it. It's a non-working order, but I looked in there. There's nothing burn up. It just needs some TLC, and I'll get that one back into service. That would be the original, and those were out at the same time as the original GX, and that I believe would have been their largest. That's at the time. They had I think they might have had a 2350 GX, but I'm not positive on that. I'm a little murky. Those would have been in the 80s, and then maybe 91, 92 they released the digital reference. So this would be like a Gen 2. And these amps, I always really liked them because they milled the logo and the model number and digital reference actually into the extruded aluminum heatsink, and you can see it's pretty sharp looking. I thought that Orion were always one of the more classy designs, and the millwork seems to be done really well on these. And then they also did it on the SX. But yeah, the original SX had a Moon and Stars logo similar to that 425, but it was milled into the heatsink. The 225 is kind of probably their most famous. These were one of the more common cheater amps, early 90s, and they won quite a bit of competitions because, you know, although it's supposed to be 2 times 25 50-watt class amp at 4 ohm, you drop it down to 2 ohm, and even there's supposedly you can run them at 1 ohm, and they are they're closer to 350, 400, so pretty powerful little amps. Now what's interesting is the 250 is supposed to be double the size, but you really won't see more than 550 watts, 560 out of a 250. So really, you got about 150 watts difference between the 225 HCCA and a 250 HCCA. Now, what's interesting is that it's got the same board as a 2150, but you'll notice any HCCA versus it's the red versus the black counterpart. The black one seems to always do more power. So I don't know if they, by reducing the rail voltage, they can't get the most, even if you drop down the ohms, out of the FETs. I really don't know how that works, but I know that the black amplifiers, which don't seem to be as sought after as the red ones, but they're I mean, in person, they're really good looking amps too. They seem to do more watts. So like the 225, you'll see, you know, between 350 to 400 tops. You get a 275, you get a little bit north of 400 watts. The 250, like I said, about 550 watts, give or take. And then a 2150 will do it 600 fairly easily. They do get a little bit warm, but I don't know. I haven't heard too many horror stories about these amps, especially the HCCA. I think the rail voltage was so low you could just keep hook up a whole string in parallel subs and not worry too much about damaging the amplifier. They were built pretty bulletproof. Whereas the GX, which are excellent sounding amplifiers, well built, those were that series. I guess, and I don't have personal experience really with it, but from all accounts, you don't want to let your voltage drop. Voltage drop will burn up the power supply section if you drop below 12 volts. And then low impedance also, I guess, tended to do damage to these amplifiers more readily than the SX or the HCCA. Now, one thing that's on the this generation, and I think subsequent generations, that I think should be on every single amplifier, that I just love, the feature I love on these, is when you go to set them up, they've got the DIN for running like outboard processors. It's got that phantom power, I think they called it, and then, you know, your RCAs. But then here you've got 2 peak meters, one for right channel and left channel, and the power light. But those peak meters come in handy because then you know if you're clipping your amp. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, I usually set gain by ear, but this leaves no doubt, and you can feel comfortable that you've set the amp properly. And there's a gain right there. And they also have this EQ button, which there's like been a lot of talk about that. Like some people say it does a lot, other people say it doesn't do too much. My experience, I mean, you if you're setting your gain, you want to have that in, because if you don't and you set your gain and then you push it in, you'll clip the amp. And then the mono button, which the 280GX you couldn't just bridge that amp. You had to have a separate the 400 I think it was a BDG bridging module to actually run that in mono bridge mode. And on the other side of the amp, you have your power connectors, which these are like 8 gauge, and then the Molex plug, which people hate. I don't really have a problem with it. Um, I don't mind them at all, but some people really don't like to use those. It can make for a sloppy install, but if on your whatever you're mounting it to, if you just tuck the wires down, you can hide them no problem. Um, and then the one interesting thing about that 425 is there's no RCA connectors. There's two DIN plugs at the end of that amplifier. Um, Essentially, that's two 225s in one chassis. I believe I opened it up once, and I believe that board is one single PCB, but you can see, distinctly two separate amplifiers on just one long board. So it's just two 225s on the one PCB that runs the length of that amplifier. And then another amps that I have that I bought. These are kind of sweet. I believe these are from 1986, and my guess from that is on the code. It's like 1086 317. And another thing that tells me that this amp was a real early run is that later on in the GX series, you would notice that the end plate said built with quality to military standards. This doesn't have that on there, but it's the same board, same amplifier. But I'll open that up. These are brand new in the box. I got two of these 240 GXs. Got them super cheap on eBay. You open it up, and they came with the sticker, which is sweet. It looks like the amp with the two bars running down it, and then it's got the Moon and Stars logo, and it says "Rock by Orion, the best of the best." And then later on in the GX series, if you bought an amp, it came with a sticker that said, I'm trying to think what that one. I can't remember, but it looked real similar, the same color scheme, just had different graphics. Then you got the manual, and these manuals are really sweet. The manual is kind of a catalog and manual in one, and it comes with it has the GS amps, which those were gold plated, and they were like essentially the same boards as these other amps. I think the GS 100. I want to say that was a 2150, and the GS 1000 was like the 425 or the 235 or what would it be 2350 GX. I'm not positive on that. I know it says in here, but yeah, it just has all their amps throughout the lineup. You got the 220, 240, which that's what this is, and you can see amps back then came with all the accessories. Basically, everything you would need to hook this amplifier up comes in this. I mean, even the fuse, the power cable terminated into a fuse holder, and then they gave you the wire to go from there to the battery, which was kind of cool. I mean, it's something they definitely don't do now. I mean, with the size like wiring that you need for today's amplifiers. There's a 2150. So it looks like, okay, so the GS 1000 was a 280 GX, but gold plated, made specifically for the customer. They would even mill. Those were milled, whereas the other GXs, it was a sticker put on the amp. Those were actually milled in, and they were gold plated, and they would put the purchaser's name. They would mill it right into the heatsink, which was super sweet. And then you got 4100 GX. And then they have all the accessories that you could get with these, which they had plenty at Orion. I've heard that the PPI accessories of the same time period, people preferred those over these Orions, but I haven't used any of the Orion ones, so I couldn't really tell you what I thought of that. One thing I always wanted was this LED display. I thought that would be really cool to incorporate into a system. I've seen them come up on eBay that they go for big money. And then their Orion had their own cables, and then just different diagrams as to different systems that they recommend, like how to, like, what to put in the signal path into what, and how to hook up, individual systems. Which, I don't know. I just really thought that this was a cool manual. Yeah, when you go to each of the amplifiers, they have all their specifications listed. So the signal to noise ratio is one thing I noticed, like 110 dB. But on the ones I have here, I have a 280GX right there, but it's like a later one. But the 240 was actually a 107 dB signal to noise ratio. But I mean, these specs are really good, and then everything is done at 12 volt, not 14.4. So you'd see a little more power out of these than's listed. This is what it looked like if you bought one new. I've never taken this out of the plastic. The other one's the same way. But just really sharp looking amps. And that's what this one looks. This is how I know it's an early one. The power LEDs right there. These did not have the clipping indicators on them. That came out on the next generation, the digital reference. And then this was just had all the cords and whatever on this side. These came with a Molex plug, but this Molex plug is smaller than goes in these, so they're not interchangeable. The later 280GX, and I think the larger amplifiers in the series, they shared the same Molex plug as the later digital reference second generation Orion amps, but this one is actually smaller. But all the wiring, everything came bundled with it in the box. And look at all the accessories they send with you. There's the Molex plug. It's a real tiny one. And then, the fuse holder, the power cable. They even, they include the remote turn on cable for the remote turn on with it. And I'm trying to think if this, I know Orion had their own wiring, and I don't know if this says on there. I think this is more of just a generic wire at this point in the Orion's history. I think later on they had their own labeled cable. I do have, came with the 250 HCCA. I came with a fuse holder, and the fuse holder for that is actually glass. And it's got the Orion, the logo like that you see there, and that's printed on the glass fuse holder. So it's not even plastic; it's actual glass. So the Orion stuff was very high quality, overbuilt. And then one thing that Big D Wiz on his channel, he noticed the Orions and did a test to see if it's true, is Orion had listed their product as being pulse width modulated regulation, like a regulated power supply, and these amps are not. The more voltage you feed them, the more watts you get out of them. So that's kind of confusing, and I'm not really sure why Orion did that. Why they stated that. I don't even think they're not partially regulated. They're completely unregulated. The more you put in, the more you go out. He proved it on the dyno. That was with a pop top, but the pop top, other than the crossover section on the board, is not much different from this, from the digital reference series. These, for whatever reason, I just prefer these to the pop tops. This is my favorite. I think it's the sharpest looking ones Orion did. Outside the NT series, which are absolutely gorgeous amplifiers. They had different colors, but they did this anodized marble look to them. That was it was just crazy. It was really, really sweet looking. So I think that's about it for the Orion amplifiers that I own. I do not have. They had a couple of really large amplifiers They had the HCCA 2100, and they had and the counterpart to that in the SX was the 2250, and then it was also called the 2250 the Beast, and like I think it was the XTR 2250. I think the XTR, I want to say that came out during the pop top, so that would have been like third generation. Those came out maybe, these ran from I believe around 91, 92 to around 95, 96, somewhere in there, and that's when these ended and the pop tops began. But yeah, I like Orion, the look of them. If you open them up, and I'll have to do a gut shot on some of these. The boards are really clean. They place their FETs, and actually Precision Power also did the same thing way back when, where the FETs were laid flat and then soldered onto the contact pads of the PCB, so they're not bent down, they're not sticking up from it, they're laying flat against it. And to me, that seems like the way to go. I mean, not only for servicing them later on, but just that there's nothing floating around in there, there's nothing to shake around, everything's laying flat and against a solid surface. But yeah, that's the Orions. I mean, they had, if you're collecting Orion, which I kind of started this collection, but then you get in, they had so many different versions and so many different one-offs. They had the concept line, which you could bridge those down to like, I don't know, quarter ohm or something ridiculous. And those were kind of more of a proof of concept and not really a real large production run. But those heat sinks are just polished. There's no coloring to them, and those are extremely gorgeous amplifiers. I'd like to get my hands on them, but those go for quite a bit of money, as well as the NTs do. And if you're going to get into Orion collecting, you got to have a big wallet because they start to go up in price. It's kind of why I just have the smaller ones, because this was kind of more in my price range than the 2100 HCCA, the 2250. I was gonna buy two 2250s and four Cerwin Vega strokers, 15s from no 18s. There was four 18 Cerwin Vega strokers and two 225s, and just at the time I just didn't have the money, but I would have really liked to have made that investment. Um, but they just you don't things come around, you'll see them, but generally if you're going to go to eBay, you're going to be paying top dollar for things like that. You more have to find a deal like this is just a guy I know, that I go and do business with him, personally. He's about like about an hour and a half, hour 45 away from me, and I'll go out and pick things up from him. He gets a lot of really good deals and passes those along to me. And that's kind of the way to go if you're going to collect Orion, is to be patient and to find like the Craigslist, the Facebook deals, and not necessarily eBay unless you absolutely have to have it, because they do command a premium, much like a PPI Art Series, or some of the early Fosgate, like the more rare Fosgates, like the what is it, the 1000, the Terminator edition, things like that. I mean, like, it's just, you can get them, but you're going to pay a lot of money unless you get it. You kind of just find a deal. So though you're collecting in that kind of realm, you have to kind of be patient. But so that's the Orion amps that I have.